It's the amazing Rico Brogna podcast with your host, Evan Roberts.
Let's open up that mailbag, baby. Welcome into episode number 586. Man, we have no life. Welcome to episode 586 of Rico Brogna. I'm Evan Roberts. I have made a promise that I will attempt to do a mailbag at least once a week where we hit a variety of Mets topics controlled by you, the loyal Rico listener, by emailing us at thericob@gmail.com. And we will attempt to do that on this episode where we hit a variety of off-season topics. We will do our free agent deep dive on position players. That will be live on the YouTube channel on Sunday night and posted to your podcast feed at some point Sunday night or early Monday morning. Before we get to your emails, there was a bit of information over the last couple of days, including the fact that Edwin Diaz and Juan Soto were at the MLB award show in Las Vegas on Thursday night. And Edwin Diaz gave, I thought, very honest and interesting quotes. First, Edwin Diaz put his odds of returning to the New York Mets at about 50-50. He also went on to say, "I just have to get the best deal for my family. I love New York. I would love to stay in New York. But if I have to go to another place, I would be happy. I want to win a ring. So wherever I go, I want to win a ring and enjoy the time. I like the organization. You know, if they come with the best deal for me, I'd enjoy to stay with them. But at the end of the day, I don't know what they're thinking." I'll tell you what I'm thinking based on a quote like that. I really appreciate Edwin Diaz's honesty, because this is as close to a show me the money, I'm going to go to the highest bidder, as you'll ever get from a ball player. Because that's what it was. It was, sure, I like New York. Sure, the organization's cool. But I got to get paid. I need to take care of my family. And taking care of one's family is code for make me the best offer. So if there was any, I guess, thought that Edwin Diaz loves us, the fan base or the city, so much, he's going to take less to stay, those quotes really eliminate that. And so this is going to come down to a bidding war. We've heard reports that Edwin Diaz wants a 5-year, $100 million contract. The Mets are going to probably say, we'd like to give you 3 years or 4 years. I assume salary-wise, because the salary that Edwin Diaz was making is not that far off from a 5-year, $100 million deal. So it's really just continuing what Edwin Diaz was making with a bunch of years attached to it. Part of why you opt out is to secure more years down the road. So are the Mets willing to just basically give him the same contract they gave him 3 years ago? I certainly lean to the side of yes, because I also wonder, what is the ultimate risk? Yes, he's in his 30s. Yes, this would pay him until he's 37 years old, but he's a closer. Are you really deeply concerned about him falling apart in his mid-30s? He's a closer. And there isn't really a long track record of relief pitchers just falling apart. You look at Aroldis Chapman and the age and the mileage and obviously the success he just had with the Boston Red Sox. And remember, he was going to be a free agent too, and the Red Sox tacked on another year. Diaz feels worth the risk. So I stand with most other Met fans in hearing these quotes and saying, okay, Steve, okay, David, get the job done. I mean, just make sure you're not outbid by the Toronto Blue Jays or the Los Angeles Dodgers or whatever team is going to come hot and heavy for Edwin Diaz. The other guy that said some interesting things was Juan Soto. Juan Soto was there at the award show and made a strong case for re-signing Pete Alonso and Starling Marte. Quote on Pete, "I hope we can have more times to come and more fun together," via Laura Albanese, great reporter. On Marte, you need a guy that helps you the most through the tough times and tries to bring the team back to where it is supposed to be. So again, Juan Soto making a big deal of the leadership of Starling Marte. I'm curious how much David Stearns is going to listen to his best player. Ultimately, say what you want about Juan Soto's season last year and whether he was the MVP of the Mets or not. The Mets' best player is Juan Soto. Love Lindor, love Alonso. I love Edwin Diaz. I love Nolan McLean. But for the next bunch of years, the Mets' best player is Juan Soto. He signed the richest contract in the history of the sport. And so I do wonder how much David Stearns listens to him. So if he comes out and says, which he just did, hey, I think it's a really big deal to bring back Starling Marte, is that a priority for David Stearns? I think you should listen to it to a degree. I think when we're evaluating Starling Marte, we can't put him in the prism of right-handed bat who can play the outfield once in a while and break down his stats. I think you have to look at that, but also throw in the fact that your best player genuinely feels he is the leader of the team, more so than Francisco Lindor, as we made a big deal of earlier this season. I'd like to bring Marte back. I talked about that when we were doing my Mets offseason plan, all of our Mets offseason plans, and I'd bring him back on a one-year deal. I don't think he's going to cost a lot, and I think that Marte was able to prove last year that he doesn't need to be an everyday player anymore and can still provide a value. So I don't think you need to bring Marte back and give him the DH spot. I think he can come back as one of your last position players on your roster. He can be useful. He can play the outfield once in a while, though not a lot, but more importantly, can be a right-handed bat who can DH. And according to Juan Soto, provides leadership. Soto also talked about his disappointment in losing Anton Richardson, but understands it's a business. So those are some of the things said by Edwin Diaz and Juan Soto at the awards ceremony on Thursday. I have no opinions on these awards because I don't care anymore. And I think Major League Baseball should announce these awards on the Monday after the regular season is over. It is very difficult, even for me as a diehard geek sports fan who hosts a podcast called the Rico Brogna. It is difficult for me to care about an award from a season that was over a month and a half ago. You present these awards the day after the season ends, there'll be one full day of arguing about it before you get to the postseason. So that's my advice for Rob Manfred and Major League Baseball. Let's open up the Rico mailbag, the ricob@gmail.com.
Hold on. You're not happy at all that Pete Alonso got a vote for MVP?
No, I don't particularly care.
Why not, though? Doesn't that show he had a good season? You're not excited at all about that?
I know he had a good season, but think about this podcast, which we have more control over than MLB awards. And think about the way we have produced the last month and a half. In October, right after the Mets season ended, we looked back at the year. We gave out our awards. We did it days after the season was over. We named Edwin Diaz the season MVP. We handed out grades. We looked back. When it's a month and a half later, I'm not looking back anymore. I'm done. So, yes, I cared a month ago. But when it's late November, it's not really late November, but it's mid-November, and we're close to Thanksgiving, it's like asking me, Evan, do you care about the R.A. Dickey, Clayton Kershaw Cy Young vote? Yeah, I cared about it then. I don't care about it now. It's the past. So that's how I feel.
Well, but the only thing is that, hey, there's negotiations going on for Pete Alonso. The fact is he's got some MVP votes now, the number one or two. Means nothing.
No, it means nothing. I already know my value towards Pete. You know your value towards Pete. Him getting a fifth place vote does not move anything.
Scott Boras can't change that. Scott Boras can't put that in there. Say, hey, by the way, look at the votes.
Scott's a great agent. He can try everything he wants, and he probably should. But at least for me, and I think most people, we don't care anymore. It's the Aaron Judge, Cal Raleigh thing is a great example. There were days spent on WFAN talking about Aaron Judge versus Cal Raleigh. And then the award is announced, and none of us mentioned it. And that's not a knock on us. It's a knock on baseball. It's old news. It's like, stop asking me to care about something that was so long ago.
All right. I was just trying to pull something out there. You never know.
I'm just telling you how it is, at least for me. Let's kick off our emails with Michael. Michael writes, guys, I'm sure you heard the report that the Mets have lost $350 million last year, which led the league despite setting a franchise record in ticket sales. Can you explain how that is and how it would affect Steve Cohen's willingness to spend? When Steve Cohen bought the team, I felt like he would be different from the other owners because it already had a multi-billion-dollar business. Since he has that business, I thought he would treat the Mets as a toy instead of a business to make a living. However, losing $350 million, even for a billionaire, is tough to take. I felt that money wouldn't be the reason Cohen would sign players needed to win a championship. But if he continues to lose that much money, then maybe he might get cheap. Your thoughts, Michael? Michael, the Mets losing $350 million last year is not a surprise to me, and it's not a surprise to Steve Cohen, because I think Steve Cohen knew that buying the New York Mets, now in terms of franchise valuations, that will go up, and that's happening. Like, I'm sure if the value of the New York Mets today is even greater than what he paid to buy them 5 years ago. But he knew going in, owning this team, it's kind of a losing proposition. I'm sure he'd like to make money, and I'm sure there's a way somewhere down the road maybe they can make money. But I think he knew, upon having the huge payrolls that the Mets have had over the last couple of years, that even with an increase in ticket sales and an increase in prices on tickets, that it was still going to be a losing proposition. So when I saw that story leaked, I ask a few questions, such as, why is it leaked? What's the motivation of the leak? I don't think it's coming from Steve Cohen. I don't think he's trying to make us feel bad. I don't think he's trying to set Met fans up for, I'm not going to spend as much money because I just lost $350 million. I think this is a leak set up by the commissioner and by major league owners to let the players know before this work stoppage that's going to hit us in a year. See, even the Mets are losing money. You guys want to continue to get paid, and look, the Mets just lost $350 million. So that's my educated guess on why that figure was even leaked out. But I don't think it's a surprise to Steve Cohen, and I think Steve Cohen always knew and has even said, yeah, I'm spending my own money to make the Mets good. Where I think Cohen will lose patience is not necessarily losing the money. I think it's the Mets not being successful. Because I think eventually, and I don't think that's going to be the case right now, he will look at David Stearns and say, what the hell is going on? I'm giving you all this money to spend per year. We can't have the season end with 83 wins and miss the playoffs. So that can be a frustration at some point. But I don't look at those losses that the Mets suffered as Steve Cohen saying right now, all right, foot down, I'm not spending anymore. But the Mets losing money should not be a surprise. And it's certainly not going to be a surprise to Steve Cohen. He's expected it, and he's also had it happen, I think, every single year he's owned the team. Jay in Manhattan has a major issue with us. Well, me. Evan, love the Rico. Love your thoughts, analysis, and the way you churn out terrific Mets content during the offseason. Appreciate it. This is where he's going to get upset. I do have one request, and it's that you please change the way you pronounce Syracuse. I grew up in central New York and live in Syracuse for part of the time. The correct pronunciation is Syracuse. Like, I like my steak with a good sear. The way you say it, Syracuse, is wrong. And frankly, we hate it. I don't know why some New Yorkers say it that way. Everywhere else in the country, people say it right. It just comes from people here in New York, and I think in particular, Long Island. At first, I was able to let it go, but the more I hear it, the more I hate it. And now that you've coined the phrase Syracuse shuttle, it comes up more and more. I feel like if I hear it again, my ears are going to bleed. Thanks again for feeding us rabid Met fans during the winter. LGM, Jay from Manhattan. How do you pronounce it? Like, I just read his email, and I'm still even confused. And I warn you, Jay, I have many issues in life. I am far, far from perfect. The only thing I can tell you is I try very hard. And when I have a pronunciation issue and then someone calls me out on it, or I even call myself out on it, it becomes a mental block. So, for example, as long as Tom Thibodeau and Kayvon Thibodeau shared a city, I would get very confused. And I'll give you a meta analogy. Do you guys remember a pitcher named Logan Verrett? Or Logan Verrett? I'm not sure which one, because I would call him Logan Verrett, I think. And my old boss at WFAN, a guy by the name of Eric Spitz, who I have great respect for, would always call me into his office and say, "You're pronouncing his name wrong." And I'd say, well, what is it? And even to this day, I forget if it's Verrett or Verrett. It's like a mental block. So I'll try this again. It's Syracuse, like I'm searing a steak, not Syracuse or Syracuse. So, hey, Hoff, what do you call that shuttle that the Mets have between AAA and the major leagues? What is it called?
Syracuse.
What?
Syracuse.
I don't even know if you're right.
Syracuse.
Syracuse.
Or Syracuse.
Syracuse.
WNBC.
Thank you very much, Jay. We will do our best. Syracuse shuttle. Sam writes, hey guys, in your last mailbag edition, you had a nice breakdown of Munetaka Murakami, who in my opinion is more of a boom or bust player. Considering the potential first base need if Alonso walks, I'm starting to think Kazumo Okamoto might be the better option. After looking at his NPB numbers, he appears like a very consistent player with a higher average and less strikeouts. From 2018 to 2024, he had at least 27 home runs every year and seems to walk a decent amount. He also appears to be a strong defender with 3 Gold Gloves, will not command as much as Murakami, and is a right-hand hitter. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Huge fan. So, Sam, I agree with you. Now, I preface this with the unknown of the Japanese baseball player. I mean, all we can do is read scouting reports and look at Baseball Reference. With the rest of free agency, even if we do the same thing, we have a frame of reference. We've seen the guys play. But there are 2 things I'll give you besides the numbers that you analyze that appeal to me more about Okamoto than Murakami. Number 1, the defense. That matters. I sound like David Stearns now, right? Run prevention. No, but versatility matters. Having a guy that can play third base if the situation holds, or can play first base if the situation holds, and do it both at a high level is a great value. Before we say goodbye to Jeff McNeil, because I think it seems obvious that we will, there was a report earlier this week that the Mets are listening on Jeff McNeil, and look, quite frankly, they should trade him. He no longer fits this team, and I think if you're looking to shake things up, trading Jeff McNeil makes a lot of sense. Final year of a contract. But the reason I bring Jeff up is one of my defenses of him over the last couple of years, to Pete and to others, is his versatility, is the idea that he could be the opening day left fielder if need be. He could be the opening day right fielder if need be. He can be the opening day second baseman, which he's mostly been, if need be. And that's a value not just in 1 year, but it's a value over the next 5 years, because you don't know where injuries are going to take you or your roster is going to take you. So the appeal of Okamoto is that right now, if the Mets sign him, there are 4 ways. 4 is too much. There are 3 ways he could be used. Number 1, they don't sign Pete Alonso, and Okamoto is the first baseman. Simple as that. They do sign Alonso. Okamoto is the third baseman, and either Brett Beatty is a trade chip or Brett Beatty becomes a second baseman on an everyday basis. I think most of us felt decent about the way Beatty played second base last year, and maybe even though we're all assuming third base, based on the way the offseason goes, Beatty becomes a bigger part at second base. And then the other option is similarly to the way we've talked about Cody Bellinger being on this team, playing every day and playing numerous positions. Okamoto could be a guy who plays a little bit of third base, a little bit of first base, and even sometimes DHs. And Okamoto's even played the outfield. Not that I think he's projecting to be much of that. So without even knowing what they're going to be at the major league level, because we don't, I like his versatility. The other thing is, it is scary about Murakami's struggles with high-octane fastballs. I think we've all seen the stats that have been going around that on fastballs of 94 or higher, Murakami hit about 0.95. Now, I think he will adjust. I don't think that is going to be a thing at the major league level. I mentioned that on the last Rico, but nevertheless, it's something to keep in mind. So it feels like Okamoto probably has less of a bust factor, as Sam points out, but maybe not the same highest of ceilings. So I agree with you when analyzing those 2 ball players and kind of picking a preference. There is some appeal to Okamoto. I think in Murakami's case, he comes here and he ends up as the designated hitter. And not that there's a problem with that. We've talked about Kyle Schwarber being on this team, and he clearly is a designated hitter. And look, maybe Murakami is Kyle Schwarber. I mean, maybe he's a younger Japanese version of Kyle Schwarber. I mentioned last time, if you look at his numbers in Japan, he's Pete Alonso. You're basically going to try to replace Pete Alonso with a younger model from Japan without knowing if he's going to translate those numbers. It's nice to have a big bat. And if he happens to be the DH, you'll live with it. But you'd always prefer someone that can play the field and do it at a decently high level. Let's go to Charlie. Charlie writes, guys, love the show and appreciate your objective insight on all things Mets. Nice to know there are other people that are obsessed with the Mets as I am. I wanted to get your thoughts on taking back Javier Baez's contract in a potential Tarek Skubal trade. Even though his contract is abysmal, he would help out with run prevention at multiple positions of need, including center field. I also wonder if taking his contract could lighten the load of prospects the Mets have to give. Here's my proposal. We get Skubal and Baez. They get Brandon Sproat, David Peterson, Mark Vientos, AJ Ewing, and Ryan Clifford. It's a pretty good offer, by the way. I mean, you're giving them I think it's one top 100 prospect, but borderline two. You're giving them three really good prospects in Sproat, Ewing, Clifford, and then two major leaguers that can help them right now as the Tigers are trying to win in David Peterson and Mark Vientos. So I certainly don't think it's a bad offer. The Javier Baez thing is interesting. We have talked about this. Like, would it lessen what you have to give up? And what I wonder about skeptically on it lessening what you have to give up is the fact that the Detroit Tigers are not a small market team. They are not the Pirates. They are not the Twins. They have shown in the past, whether it's the contracts for Miguel Cabrera or Justin Verlander, a willingness to spend. So there's still a team that could even re-sign Tarek Skubal. But let's say they feel like, you know what, we're not going to be able to do it before free agency. And as much as we're willing to spend, we just don't think we could outbid the Mets, the Yankees, the Red Sox, the Dodgers. So we're going to trade him. I don't think the Tigers are the kind of team that needs the offset of money and would be willing to take back a lesser package. You know what I mean? Like, there are teams, Minnesota's a great example, especially if they traded Joe Ryan, where they may say, you know what, we'll take less back because we're so desperate to get rid of this contract. Even though the Javier Baez contract is bad, and I'll give you the details in about 30 seconds, I don't think the Tigers want to tell their fan base in a year in which they're still trying to win a championship, we took back less to rid ourselves of a player who, while he's grossly overpaid, actually helped us last year. Got some big hits in the postseason. That's a really tough sell. So the more I've thought about this would taking back Baez lessen what you have to give up? I don't think so. Because I don't think the Detroit Tigers are that same small market team that would say, oh, please take that Baez contract. We'll take less back for the best pitcher in baseball coming off back-to-back Cy Youngs. I don't see it anymore. As far as Baez's contract is concerned, he is due to make $24 million in 2026 and another $24 million in 2027. He also features a 10-team no-trade clause. Don't know who those teams are. Would it be the Mets? Probably not. He obviously played here and I think had a willingness to come back despite the thumbs down. So it's not a good contract. It's 2 years, $48 million. But again, I'm theorizing on this. I don't think the Detroit Tigers are the kind of team that needs that. That would be my answer, but good thought. Scott writes, you caught yourself in the last episode. You caught yourself in the last episode, but you failed to mention David Peterson twice when talking about the starters the Mets already have under contract going into next year. I've noticed that Peterson is getting majorly discredited this offseason because he was not able to finish strong last year, so I checked the stats. Before you continue, I will take my losses on plenty of things. Yes, and I don't even remember what the topic was. I mean, we were talking about starting pitching. I don't remember what it was about, whether it's trading for Skubal or signing a free agent. But when I quickly went through who is in the rotation, at first I forgot David Peterson and then quickly said, I forgot to even mention David Peterson. That was not done because I hate him. That wasn't done because I don't want him in the rotation. It was done because we're talking, a million thoughts go through our head. And I was making the point, I actually remember now, I was making the point how, unlike in past off seasons, the Mets go into 2026 with starting pitchers under contract. They don't have the whole rotation as free agents, which they had basically last year and the year before that, right? And so I was pointing out that the Mets technically, not that this would go over well, don't have to add a starting pitcher. And they could go into spring training 2026 with, okay, here's our rotation. And I was naming all the names. And I said Clay Holmes and Sean Manaea and Kodai Senga and Nolan McLean. And for a brief second, as Scott pointed out, I corrected myself. I failed to mention the name David Peterson. David Peterson, barring a trade, barring him being in a big Skubal trade, because I don't think otherwise, even in a year in which it's his final year of control, the Mets are going to trade David Peterson. I just don't. Could they? Sure, they could. He's got good value. I mean, I think teams would line up to trade for David Peterson, even with only 1 year left of team control. So I think he's going to be here, barring trade. And I appreciate what he did last year. We talked about that in our grading episodes of the Rico Brogna. I didn't want to give him an awful grade just because the final month was awful. I can't ignore that the guy was an all-star. So before I read the rest of your email, Scott, and your passionate defense of David Peterson, me not saying his name initially when talking about the Met rotation was not a slight. It was not me trying to take a shot at him. It was literally just, sometimes you forget. That's the way I would phrase it. All right. Anyhow, David Peterson's innings were 105 in 2022, 111 in 2023, both split between the bullpen and rotation, and 121 in 2024 because of a late start due to injury. A 10% increase in innings pitched for 2025 would have taken him to 133 innings, and lo and behold, that marks the exact beginning of his ineffectiveness. He had a 2.98 ERA and a good, but not great, 1.23 whip through 22 starts and 133 innings, and we were calling him the ace of the staff. However, his next start was the Atlanta game, where he gave up 6 runs in 3 1/3 innings, and from that point on, he threw just 35 2/3 innings over 8 starts, logging an 8.83 ERA and 1.90 whip. He actually had 2 very good starts after the Atlanta game, but the bad was so bad, it didn't really matter. He was out of the circle of trust. But remember, over 250 innings between June of 2024 and August of 2025, he had a 2.95 ERA with a 53% ground ball rate. I think he just hit the wall, having never thrown so much before. For the future, I am bullish on David Peterson coming back stronger for having endured the long season, and I'd love to know your reason for kind of writing him off. Or am I wrong? And do you think he can return to a 2.80 to 3.20 ERA, number 3 type pitcher that he showed over those 250 innings? Scott, are you wrong? Yeah, you're wrong that in assuming that I've written off David Peterson. I have not. I haven't uttered any words on this Rico Brogna other than innocently excluding his name for 30 seconds. And that's all it was. I haven't uttered any words on the Rico, even when recapping the season, in which, yes, we called him out for his struggles, where I've told you I don't believe in him. I don't remember the exact grade I gave him, but when Hoff and I were grading all the players, I think you remember this, Pete, I was passionately defending David Peterson and the season that he had. And I thought that was great research, by the way, in terms of the innings and when he hit the wall. But I did say, yeah, I think he hit the wall. I think he'll be fine. And I would absolutely have him in the rotation, no questions asked, in 2026.
Well, I could definitely guarantee that you didn't give Peterson an A like you did Luis Torrens.
I didn't give anybody an A but Luis Torrens.
But I do think that you definitely gave him a better mark than some of the other pitchers, that's for sure. Listen, David Peterson is what he is. His biggest issue is that he just can't do it for a full season. I mean, that's been the biggest problem.
I understand, but listen to what he wrote. He missed time in 24 because of the hip procedure, then pitched great. This past season, he was trying to build up to an innings amount he had never really hit. So do you not at least buy that now that he busted through that innings number, that he can be capable of making a 32 start season in which he pitches to the level that we saw that made him an all-star?
Unless he's still has a hip issue, which someone I think else brought that up during the season. He was making these weird moves. But yes, you're right. If he was able to get through a full season, technically speaking, you passed the hump. Hey, listen, take away 3 starts, you should be even better, right?
Look, he proved what he can be. Now, can he stay healthy? That's the question for every pitcher, right? I mean, when you say, well, his hip may be bothering him. Yeah, if he has a bad hip, and we saw what David Peterson looks like with a bad hip. And injuries are very tough to predict, but I would mostly agree with Scott. The only thing I disagree with is thinking that I gave up on him because I failed to mention. Here's the thing. We probably do 4 Ricos a week. Each one tends to be an hour. So figure we're doing 4 hours of Met content with 0 commercials. I'm a human. I didn't say his name for 30 seconds. It's not like I didn't say his name at all during that little conversation about the rotation. I quickly said, oh, yeah, David Peterson, too.
There was a podcast not too long ago that you completely missed on Starling Marte. And you were like, I can't believe I even did that. I have to stop the whole. He was going to make us do the podcast over again.
That is. Well, that one annoys me because believe it or not, I do a lot of research sometimes for the Rico. And so that was the Met free agent edition of the Rico Brogna. And I had all our free agents written down. I even, had some stats written down, some monies that they made last year written down. And for whatever reason, I just failed to mention Starling Marte until the last 10 minutes of the Rico. And I did get one person. It was only one. I appreciated that. Who emailed the Rico. He must have been listening in the midst of it and said, Evan, how are you not mentioning Starling Marte? And I wrote this person back. I try to write back on the emails. I'm not great at it. I try to mostly answer it on the podcast. And I wrote the guy back and I said, just finish the episode, because you'll hear us break down Starling Marte. We'll get there. So, yeah, I think Scott's got a great point about Peterson. I believe in David Peterson. The only disagreement I had was thinking that I hate him because I didn't mention his name. That would be my only disagreement. Matt writes, everyone's talking like Nolan McLean is a shoo-in to repeat his success next year. I think he's awesome. Don't get me wrong, but lots of people also thought that about Mark Vientos this time last year. What do you think? How is it that he's talked about as such a sure thing? Won't the book get out on him? That is a great question, Matt, in terms of we're all in love with Nolan McLean. Nolan McLean gave us some of the best moments of what was overall a very disappointing season. I think we look at Nolan McLean and we see Jacob deGrom. Or we look at Nolan McLean and we see Matt Harvey. We see that young horse, that next stud. But what does he do over a full season? What does he do when it's the second and third and fourth time around the league? Can he get through a full season healthy? Can he make 30-plus starts? I think those are all incredibly fair questions. And you're right. We shouldn't look at Nolan McLean and depend on him being an ace. And the good news is, here's the proof that we're not doing that. We're still insistent on them trading for an ace. We're still insistent on them adding some certainty to the rotation. So I think that the proper way to view Nolan McLean, and without us specifically saying it, I think our actions in terms of talking about trading for Skubal or trading for Ryan or trading for Peralta fits that we look at him as a guy with huge potential, but he features an you don't know factor. And that was my biggest issue with the Met rotation last year. And really my question with the Met rotation right now with the way it stands, with all of the names that are currently under contract, is a very high you don't know factor. And I think you want some certainty. Sean Manaea is a big you don't know. He was great 2 years ago. Last year was a disaster. Kodai Senga needs to prove he can stay healthy. He features a very high you don't know factor. Nolan McLean, just because of his youth and inexperience, makes him a you don't know factor. Even Clay Holmes, look, he's Year 2 of a converted reliever into a starter. What is he? Does he build off last year? You don't know. And then even the questions we brought up with David Peterson. Okay, can he pitch that full season? We've seen some signs of it. You don't know. And I think that Nolan McLean just provides a you don't know. What do I expect from him? I was so impressed by him. I do expect him to be great. I think he has a chance to be great. I think he has a chance to be the ace of the rotation for the next decade, fingers crossed. This is from cousin Corey. That's my cousin. Evan, love the Rico. In reference to your Pete replacement, I'll land in Bo Bichette. Okay? I prefer Pete, but Bo could be a decent bat for our lineup. You move Bo to second, and Beatty stays at third base. I don't think Bo has the arm for third, so second could make some sense. He's 27, 28 at the start of the season, so a little younger than Alex Bregman and Pete Alonso. A good pure hitter that sprays the ball all over. Not the power hitter like Pete, but hits for a higher average, can hit 20 to 25 home runs consistently when healthy. The injuries scare me a bit when Bichette is always seems to have some sort of minor injury here and there. He'll be cheaper than Pete and Bregman, probably around 7 years, $185 million. Again, I want Pete back, but Bo could be a decent replacement in the lineup if no Pete or Bregman. Yes. My first answer is yes. I think in terms of what he's capable of, in terms of what he's done, I think he does fit that biggish bat to replace Pete Alonso. Here's where I don't love the fit. And I like the player. And everything you laid out, cuz, is right on. I think this team has so much potential at second base. Like between Ronnie Mauricio, Luis Angel Acuna, who I'm not ruling out, even though I view him as like that speedster off the bench, and Jet Williams. Like, they've got 3 guys who one of them could take that job. And I don't even want to exclude Brett Beatty if they went the third base route. If you're putting Bichette at second base and Beatty is remaining at third base, where does that leave some of the young players? And as we've talked about, I know David Stearns has talked about, you want to try to win while also allowing there to be an opportunity for your younger players. I feel like second base and center field are those places. And so, yes, I think from an offensive standpoint, from what Bo has done, plus you mentioned the age, which is a huge factor. He is younger by a couple of years than Alex Bregman and Pete Alonso. I almost want to say significantly younger, but it feels like when your age starts in the 2s and he is 28 on opening day, that's a big difference. That's a huge difference. So if you're giving him an 8-year contract, you're 3 years ahead of Pete Alonso and even more, 4 years ahead of Alex Bregman. I guess ideally, I'd like to fill my power elsewhere, first base, DH, third base, and have second base be available. Like, I am not against if they make the right moves in terms of, let's say, keeping Pete, maybe the Cody Bellinger idea where he plays every day, but Nimmo DHs, Soto DHs, Alonso DHs. I would be more than happy to go into opening day and say, Ronnie Mauricio, second base is yours, bro. Go do it. Jet Williams, you've earned it. Second base is yours. So I don't dislike Bo Bichette at all. It's more the fit that leads me to preferring someone else. Steven writes, do you think Brandon Nimmo is a possibility at first base? This would save his legs and hide his weak arm. It opens the door for a power bat like Kyle Tucker in right field and sliding Juan Soto to left field. If not Tucker, finding a corner outfielder seems like it's probably easier than a first baseman. I don't think Nimmo's body is cut out to play the outfield for much longer, and trading him would be tough. Am I crazy, or is this a decent possibility? I don't think you're crazy in theory. I don't think the Mets are planning on doing that. There was a little tidbit from Joel Sherman, and it wasn't a headline, so because of that, I take it with a grain of salt, where he said the Mets were spitballing ideas on potentially moving Brandon Nimmo. Not to first base, but moving Brandon Nimmo by trading Brandon Nimmo. And the question was, how much of the salary would they have to eat to move Brandon Nimmo? I know that the idea of moving Brandon Nimmo is appealing to some. Pete Hoffman would have a party if they did that. Here's why it's really not appealing to me. Brandon Nimmo is a useful baseball player. Say what you want about him. Say what you want about his injuries or him wearing down or his on-base percentage not being as high as it used to be or whatever you want to say about him, he is a useful ball player for the New York Mets. I do not like the idea of paying money for him to go away. How does that benefit the New York Mets? That's what I would ask you. Being on WFAN, I talk a lot of Yankees and other teams. And I argued, and I feel vindicated on this, but I would argue with Yankee fans about paying off Giancarlo Stanton. Like, oh, we got to pay off his salary to make him go away. And I'm like, why? Do you think you're better off with him not being there? The money is a sunk cost. Forget the money. It's already gone. You're paying him, right? So wouldn't you rather at least have him use him the right way as opposed to I'm going to pay money to send this baseball player away? Brandon Nimmo, I'm sorry. You can give me whatever critique you want. Paying off part of that contract to literally send him elsewhere does what? And if your argument is, but Evan, I'm going to use the money I saved to go sign someone else. Brandon Nimmo's making $20 million a year, which I don't even think is that crazy of a salary. It's the years that feels crazy. How much money are you saving? And then what are you doing with the money that you're saving that you think makes the Mets that much better? So when I hear the Mets are spitballing, I don't think it makes sense to trade Brandon Nimmo. If Brandon Nimmo had value and teams were running all over themselves to take on that contract and give you a lot back, that's a different story. But I don't think that's the case at all, so why would I do that? Now, as far as Steven's question is concerned about moving into first base, I don't think they're going to do that. I don't think that's the plan. I think it's left field and maybe more time at DH.
Can I just rebut the Nimmo stuff? And you've hit on a couple of them. What are you doing with that money? Well, if you're telling me you already have a left fielder in Brandon Nimmo, or you have a guy that could play DH in Brandon Nimmo, so you can't get somebody better because you already have Brandon Nimmo, then I'm telling you that's the problem. Like, if you tell me... I
don't understand your point. Say that again.
We have Brandon. You've already said the money's gone, right? Brandon Nimmo's here. The money's gone. What are you going to... My thing is this. He is preventing the Mets from doing something better. He's already on the team, true, but I think the Mets can do better than Brandon Nimmo. There's a possibility that Brandon Nimmo is on this team right now and is blocking Pete Alonso from getting a contract. I mean, who would you prefer having, Brandon Nimmo or Pete Alonso?
I would rather have Pete Alonso, but I guess what I would ask you is how many left fielders in Major League Baseball are better than Brandon Nimmo? If you had to guess.
If I had to guess, I don't think left field is a prime position right now. That's the problem.
Okay. So you don't want to answer it, but the answer is not many. Is that what you want to admit?
Let me put it this way. Steven Kwan, is he considered a left fielder or is he a center fielder? What is he? He's more left field, right?
He mostly plays left field, yeah.
If you look at his stats are, some of them are better than Nimmo's, but which ones you want to handpick? You want to talk about power? You want to talk about RBI total? You're going to give that to Nimmo all day, but if you talk about on base percentage, if you want to talk about like average and other stuff, that's going to go to Kwan. And who's a better fielder? It's Kwan.
Not really. You want to hear the numbers?
Go for it.
Brandon Nimmo, 262 batting average. Steven Kwan, 272 batting average. So Kwan hasn't beat by 10 points. Let's have a party. Brandon Nimmo, by the way, 155 games for Brandon, 156 for Steven Kwan. So basically identical in that regard. Brandon Nimmo's on base 324, Kwan 330. Basically the same. Brandon Nimmo hit, 25 home runs, 92 RBIs. Kwan, 11 home runs, 56 RBIs.
Yeah,
not close in any way. Brandon Nimmo's OPS 760, Steven Kwan's OPS 704. The one area that Steven Kwan has significantly over Brandon Nimmo is putting the bat on the ball. That is the best attribute of Steven Kwan. It's the thing everyone loves about him. Steven Kwan only struck out 60 times last year. Brandon Nimmo 141. There's no denying that is a huge difference. But all those other numbers are pretty much in Brandon Nimmo's favor. So I'll ask you again. How many left fielders are better than Brandon Nimmo, and how much better is Steven Kwan than Brandon Nimmo?
Okay. How about defensively? Are we going to throw that in there at all or no?
Well, look, defense is very tough to measure because the defensive metrics of Brandon Nimmo were actually okay last year, though I don't think the eye test would agree with that. And also, Brandon's older than Stephen Kwan. Steven's a better defensive left fielder by a lot. I'm just talking about the offensive numbers to begin with. And even if you want to factor in the defense, again, how much better, if you want to say Kwan is a better player because the defense puts him over the top, how much better is he than Brandon Nimmo? And look around the sport and look around at the other left fielders. I mean, there's a few that are better. It's not a lot. And so if you're paying money off to get rid of a guy who right now is a top 10 left fielder in the sport, you're replacing him with what? Especially with finances. How much are you spending to get said player? What are you giving up in trade capital to get said player? Like, it actually doesn't make sense. Like, even using Kwan as an example, the Mets would have to give up a fortune to get Stephen Kwan. Is that worth it when we just went through the numbers and offensively, Brandon Nimmo is probably a better player?
Okay. But, and here's the big picture, though. We're just isolating it to left field. Big picture, if, say, you brought in a center fielder like Harrison Bader, right? Mm-hmm. You could move him to left field. You can, and that would be an upgrade defensively. Is Nimmo then going to go to a DH? He's not a DH.
Oh, yeah. But that leads to Steven's question and the ultimate answer. Brandon Nimmo needs to DH more. And assuming the Mets aren't bringing in Kyle Schwarber or Munetaka Murakami, a guy that's going to clog up the DH spot, and they're going to use the DH judiciously, Brandon Nimmo should do it 50, 60 times. And I think that may actually improve him as a player. At least I'm just spitballing the idea that him getting off of his feet more would help him defensively in left field. I just don't see, like, you could poke holes in him, and that's fine. I don't see how paying money to get rid of him, and then I don't know where you're going to replace him, I don't see how that makes the Mets better. It just changes things for the sakes of changing things because it's like, screw it, let's just change the locker room a little bit. But in terms of making the team better, I don't see how paying off a part of that contract, and I don't know where you're going with the money that you saved because you're not using the money you saved to get any of the players that are better than Brandon Nimmo. So are the Mets really better by listening on Brandon Nimmo and trading him? And the answer is no. Clearly the answer is no, which is why they're not going to trade him, which is why this whole exercise is like, we're doing it just to prove to you they're not trading him because it doesn't make sense to trade him.
Doesn't make any sense, Michael. Doesn't make any sense.
Doesn't make any, I mean, that makes sense. All right, final email. I printed them out for those that are watching on YouTube. So I was reading them like real emails. And I remind you, you can email us, thericob@gmail.com. We are doing a fine job. Let's compliment ourselves at using these Rico mailbag editions so that we can hear from you. Because sometimes during the season, I feel like, man, we don't get to enough emails. So email us right now your thoughts on the offseason or even generic Met thoughts and arguments and discussions. And we are doing it like pretty much every Friday. At least we're trying to give you a Rico mailbag. I will tell you there will be no Rico mailbag next Friday. And Edwin Diaz better not sign next Friday because I am doing a trip with my wife. We're getting on an airplane, assuming the airplane actually, takes off and we get through security lines. And we're going away for a day and a half. I can't say where we're going because my kids are not supposed to know. I don't know if that gives anything away, but my wife and I like to go away every once in a while, just us, spend some time together. And during that time, the reason I'm bringing this up is not because I'm about to get personal on the Rico, but because if Edwin Diaz signs with the Dodgers and I'm at this magical place with my wife, it would be very difficult to say to her, "Hon, I need 15 minutes to do a Rico." But you know what? I think she'd be okay with it. So without saying where I'm going for one day with my wife, there's a possibility, Hoff, we may have to do a 15-minute Rico at Frozen. You know what I mean? Like,
listen, we've had some great backgrounds before. We did was it the PGA hotel, was the hotel or whatever it was? That was an amazing. But the frozen background, I think that would be priceless.
Yeah. We're going to go around the world doing a Rico talking about Edwin Diaz signing. That, you know what? My wife would go for that. It won't be a long Rico. It would have to be like 10, 15 minutes so we can get back to, having fun. But if there is a major signing on Friday, what's the date? I guess November 22nd, which is a Saturday. Understand that I can't give you a full, hour and a half Rico. Anyhow, let's
go on the people mover. That takes up about 10 minutes. It's perfect.
You're giving too much away right now. All right.
Oh.
Not supposed to talk about where I'm going.
Sorry. All right.
Just saying Frozen was not too much. You took it up a notch with the people. Plus, the people mover is at a different place.
Yeah, it's amazing that you know more than I do, and I've been there like 1,000 times.
I'm only going to one place. Okay, I know there's many options, but it's the one with the soaring. See, let's see how anyone else gets that. We'll be soaring. That's where I'll do the Rico while I'm flying through California and soaring, or while I'm living with the land. That's where the Rico will take place. All right, I've said too much. Evan, on the previous Rico, when David Stearns mentioned the waiver wire, I had the same reaction as Hoffman. My issue is not so much the waiver wire minor league deals, but the players that Stearns acquires. Let's compare David Stearns' methodology. Current minor league players signed for the 2025 season, or for the 2026 season is what he means. Jose Rojas, lifetime batting average 188. Jihan Bay, lifetime average 223. Joey Gerber, 6.23 ERA last year in AAA. Dickie Lovelady, lifetime 5.36 ERA. Joe Jakes, lifetime 5.46 ERA. And Jose Castillo, awful. Players that have somewhat worked out who were signed to minor league waiver wire deals: Jose Iglesias, career 278 hitter with a 13.8 WAR, and Chris Davinsky, lifetime 3.91 ERA, 3.3 WAR. What is the difference between those two groups of players? The 2025 group players all have no major league track record, while the players that worked out for us do. What makes you so confident that his minor league signings will work out? Can you name any other waiver claims that worked out as well as Iglesias and Davinsky that had no major league track record? I don't have to go to Harvard like Stearns to see through the issues. Do they teach how to make a hot dog in Harvard? I wouldn't trust Stearns to do that, let alone construct a major league team. Jeez. The same issues will happen this year as they did last year, because Stearns would rather pray that 1/100th of these no-name players that he signs works out, so he can come to the press conferences with a toothpick in his mouth and act like he's the smartest guy in the room, rather than build a competent major league team. Curious on your thoughts. Wow, that's pretty rough. I think that you are being selective in terms of the last 2 years. Jose Iglesias was absolutely a former major leaguer who had success. Same with Chris Davinsky, who was a part of these, I'm not even going to call them waiver claims, these minor league free agents. But along with those guys came plenty of others. Joey Meneses, you don't need to hit on 50% of them. When you sign major league free agents, you better hit on a high percentage. When you're talking about guys on minor league deals, that is come the spring training and we'll see what happens. Now, if you're talking about how did he do last year, well, last year was Chris Davinsky. The year before that was Jose Iglesias. We are in the middle of November, and so far a lot of the signings don't have major league experience, or at least good major league experience. But trust me, there's going to be more minor league invites. And really, you just need to hit on a couple of them. So I'm not discouraged by these current minor league invites, because they're minor league invites. That's what they are. And think about it, with all due respect, you only named the one guy from 2 years ago and the one guy from last year. Meanwhile, he signed like 30 guys to minor league deals, which is the point. You don't need to hit on 10 of them. So I just won't freak out about it. And I think the problem that we have, and I can see this is happening with Hoff right now, is that we have no patience. This is a long off season. And because it's a long off season, there are two things that we do. And you know both of these things are true, Pete. Number one, when a guy like Joey Gerber is signed, we make a big deal of it because we're so thirsty for real signings. There have been no real signings. It's not just the Mets. Nobody. So when Joey Gerber signs, it's like, Joey Gerber, what the hell? That's number one. And number two, because Hoff has said this to me off air and on air. What are we waiting for with Alonso? Just make him a big offer. Let's go. That's not how negotiations work. Even if the Mets do want Pete Alonso back more so than they did last year, and they're already showing signs that they do, based on the fact there's already an offer out there, and John Heyman's even tweeting out the Boris leaks of, hey, things are much better than last year. So it definitely feels like the Mets want him and are more motivated to have him back. They're not going to bid against themselves. They're idiots if they do that. As much as I want Pete and I want Edwin, and I said this all last year, and guess what? It turned out to be true because they only had to give him a 1-year contract. They didn't have to give him the 6-year deal. So we have no patience. And so because we have no patience and we want something to happen right now, A, we want to make stupid contract offers immediately. And 2, we get mad when minor leaguers are signed because it's like, give me the real stuff. Am I wrong?
Yes. And here's why. Because you're right. At the end of the day, Pete Alonso could come back, and it's you don't want to just throw money out there that you don't need to unnecessarily. However, this should not be an offseason built around signing Edwin Diaz and Pete Alonso. It should be those two come back, and what else are we adding on to? So when we sit here, and this is going to be a long negotiation with Pete Alonso, I'm pretty sure about it. At the end of the day, if we get him and it takes till like February or March, what did we not do because we sat on Pete Alonso? What did we pivot away from? Because like this should be in addition to. Am I wrong? That I think that's my issue here. I understand the Gerber is not going to fix a hole that another player is going to fix. But I sit here and say we're waiting on Pete Alonso, and that's going to be the look what we did for you. Meanwhile, it's like why not get other things?
So to me, the two priorities to add to this Met team, along with keeping Pete and Edwin, is improving the lineup because, as I've screamed all year, they didn't score enough runs, and obviously the pitching. Okay, the starting pitching. The starting pitching to me is completely unrelated to everything else, right? If Tarek Skubal is available, go trade for him. If Freddie Peralta is available, go trade for him, and then deem a starter in free agency that you want to aggressively go after. That to me is all exclusive from Pete Alonso and Edwin Diaz. So let's put the starting pitching aside and at least agree that shouldn't hold up anything. Okay? Would you agree with that?
Starting pitching, relief pitching, sure.
Okay. So now let's get to the bat. Because I think most of us, or some of us, I can't even say all of us, would think, hey, we got to do more offensively than just bring the same team back. Right? We got to do more. We didn't score enough runs last year. That's where guys like Bellinger and Okamoto, I'm going to use him as an example, are so perfect. Where you can sign those guys not even knowing if Pete is back. Because if you bring Pete back, he works with Okamoto. He works with Bellinger. And the reason is because they're defenders. They're strongly believed in defenders. That came out worded weirdly, but you know what I mean. So we already went through the Bellinger stuff, how it makes so much sense. He's the center fielder till Benj is ready. Then he plays left. Nimmo DHs. He plays first base, which Pete has a willingness to do. And Pete DHs and Bellinger plays first base. It's perfect. And I think most of us would agree if the Mets ran back their offense by adding Cody Bellinger along with it, we'd be pretty excited. We would say, wow, okay, that's a pretty big addition to this lineup, and they've gotten better defensively. Would you agree with that statement?
Again, I'm still questionable on it, but I think, yes, if you brought back Alonso.
Yes.
And you would Marte as well?
No, don't overthink it.
Okay.
They signed Alonso and Cody Bellinger. Everything else is sort of minor. Not that we wouldn't break it down a lot on the Rico, but it's minor. You'd feel really good about this lineup. You'd feel better about the team defensively, and you'd feel like, wow, okay, we needed to get better offensively, and we've just made ourselves better.
I would feel better. I wouldn't feel 100%. I'd still be like, well, you still have a DH that's sitting there that needs to be filled.
Disagree. The DH is that. I think you're dead wrong about that, because if you believe in Benj, which is eventually going to be the center fielder, your DH is already filled. It's either Nimmo, Alonso, or not that Bellinger would DH, but you fill that hole. Bellinger essentially fills that hole. So my point is, and I think Okamoto does the same thing. Now, there's more unknown about Okamoto, obviously coming over from Japan, but he can play third base, he can play first base, and he defends at a high level. So Okamoto and Bellinger are two signings that you can make today. They could either protect you from losing Pete or be in conjunction with Pete. So how would Pete Alonso then hold up the offseason? Now, he can when it comes to maybe Kyle Schwarber or maybe Alex Bregman, though you could even argue that you could sign both of those guys. Schwarber and Alonso would be rough. I have to admit, that would be, at least defensively, that would be very rough. But I think that there are ways where you can improve this offense and protect yourself from losing Pete, where Pete doesn't hold up the entire offseason. Does that make sense?
It does. I just wish that you were David Stearns, because I trust you more than David Stearns.
Nah, you don't. I would have signed Corbin Burns last year, okay? I mean, come on.
So would most of us, though. And we would all have been wrong.
And we would have been wrong. That's for damn sure.
But who would be in the better going forward? The guy that signed Corbin Burns, or the guy that signed Sean Manaea for 3 years, or the guy that signed Frankie Montas for 2 years?
Nah, I mean, it depends what Burns does after Tommy John, but remember, you are probably going to have to give him a long-term contract. So I don't know. I don't know how we would feel after that.
Hey, listen, Garrett Cole had Tommy John surgery. He still has like 4 more years left. I mean, I'm assuming that guy's going to bounce back.
Well, okay, that's the last part. He hasn't bounced back yet. Let's see him bounce back. I mean, we're just assuming it. Like, he hasn't done it yet. He's got to then come back from Tommy John surgery. Either way, we'll see. Thank you very much for all the emails. Again, keep them coming. We'll do more mailbag editions to ricob@gmail.com. We will have a deep dive on position player free agents. That will be live Sunday night on YouTube and in your podcast feed at some point Sunday night or Monday morning. We'll go through a lot of these free agent options. We'll go deep diving on all those guys and see who makes sense, who doesn't make sense, who we'd want to sign, who we wouldn't want to sign. That's coming up on Rico Brogna. We appreciate you listening, downloading, and subscribing to Rico. Thank you very much. Goodbye from Rico Brogna.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Rico Brogna podcast. It's amazing, isn't it? Make sure you download it now to keep it on you at all times.